Hi, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast, episode 147. Glad to have you in today. We're talking about scouting amateur hitters, giving you a peek behind the curtain to some evaluation techniques that are used all across baseball and some techniques that are used with my friend, professional evaluator, successful business owner, my former coach, current day renowned coach, and co-host, Jake Epstein.
Yeah, looking forward to diving into this topic today, Jim's. Pretty timely after the draft.
Now, I agree. You just called me Jims, by the way. It's my new nickname for the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. You added an S to I had a coach once when I was a kid to call me Jims randomly. He would just say, hey, there we go, Jims. I don't know why he added an S to my name. It always stuck with me, and that's what you calling me Jims there. I'm sure it was an accident. That's what
it was unintentional, yes. I'm not smart enough to add letters to names.
So Brock Wilken, by the way, I watched some video on him. Got a chance to watch him a little bit over the week after he was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers. And now you could talk about him. We talked about Eric Brown last year when he was drafted in the first round by the Brewers. And now we could talk a little bit more about Brock Wilken. What I've noticed, he's got a nice swing. He's got a swing that I think you actually like, and it's kind of your style of hitting in a way. Stays on plane for a long time, uses his legs well. He fits well at third base because I think he's kind of a below average athlete. But nonetheless, I think there's some real chance there for a guy to hit for some power and really put up some good slugging and OPS type numbers in the future professionally.
Yeah, I think it was a good pick. I mean, there were a couple guys left, that probably weren't as advanced as him hitting wise for the 18th pick, but I think it was perfect. I think he's a guy that's going to hit. He's going to hit for power. Kind of reminds me of like a kind of a Judge kind of big guy, long arms, good build. His miss is going to be fly balls, and he's strong. So I think it's a really good power pick. And after the last couple drafts that we've had, where we've picked, really athletic, flat swinging guys that are going to find a lot of barrels, that will probably mold into power. It just happens. You get to the big leagues and you make little adjustments and the balls are a little bit harder and the guys you're around are a little bit smarter, and you tend to go from maybe 15 home runs in the minor leagues to 25 really quick. So yes, this is a guy that's going to hit the minor leagues and should produce some fairly big, Torkelson kind of numbers, I would say, in the minor leagues. I mean, he hit 30 something home runs in 60 something games in college, right? Like that's a guy that hits the ball kind of on the right plane.
We're talking Torkelson.
No, didn't he hit 30 something home runs last year? Yeah.
Well, let me check. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure he did at Wake. I thought he led college baseball in home runs, but I mean, he's got pop. He's got good extension.
You're right, by the way.
Yeah, with a little bit of, his barrel works a little bit lower, so his miss is going to be in the air, but it works a little lower with really good extension. And when you do that, you hit really high, far fly balls. If you have a little bit of a barrel drop or a bigger barrel drop early, and then you try to self-correct it by swinging up too much to the zone or finishing too high or flipping your top hand, then what happens is we hit a lot of like hard hooking balls to left field, right? We don't have that in the air power. So he's a guy that gets underneath the swing plane or the pitch plane slightly, but then he stays there. And so instead of his miss being a snap, topper to the third baseman, his miss is going to be a high fly ball towards the middle of the field. And because he's so big and strong, it's, some of those are going to work their way out. So it's the perfect miss for him, right? Like that's what you have to manage your misses as a baseball player. What do you want? Do you run well? Do you want your pull side miss to be a ground ball? Do you want your miss to be a fly ball? We don't want your miss to be a full miss. Then we're really not on play.
Hey, that's a great point. And that's actually, I like that term or collection of terms. Yeah. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, we're always going to have kind of our miss, and whenever I'm working with players, that's really the first conversation I have with them is what's your miss? What's your is it a pull side ground ball? Do we swing under pitches and miss them? Do we hit kind of lazy slicing fly balls the other way? Do we foul off good pitches? These are all kind of misses that resonate with players like, yeah, I miss good pitches. Like I get a really good pitch to hit. I feel like I'm right on it. And then I foul it straight back. And it was a, thigh high fastball or whatever. So what I do is I kind of figure out, what their miss is, and then work backwards with video. Then I kind of isolate, okay, well, what's the problem with the swing that might be causing that miss, depending on how exaggerated that miss is. So, and then knowing the kind of player you have. So, if you're 220 pounds and you're middle of the order kind of guy, I want your miss to be in the air, right? You're probably not running a 6.5 60. So, I want you, to I'd rather have a fly ball that you just miss, which you see every day in the big leagues, rather than a ground ball that could lead to a double play. Okay, if there's a runner on first base, like we're not going to give away 2 outs when we can give away 1. Plus that 1 out, if the wind's blowing out and, maybe you just barely miss it. Judge hits a lot of home runs to right center field that are only 370-something feet, that most people would hit 350 and get caught. He didn't hit it well, but it still went out of the park, and he's going to go ahead and tally that up. So if a guy is 135 pounds and he's a sophomore in high school, that is not the miss I want. Okay, there's no reason to have a fly ball miss. That's going to be a can of corn to an outfielder every single time. So I want that miss, his miss, to be, probably lower. We're going to, maybe adjust his swing plane before contact or adjust his swing plane after contact to kind of find the right part of the ball for him. And then in softball, it's the same way, right? You have some power hitters, and then you have some girls that can really run. Maybe they slap sometimes, maybe they don't. But, we maximize the size of the field, right? The size of the softball field's smaller. Hard ground balls get through. They don't usually shift in softball, right? The game's super fast from 60-foot bases. So, the infield is more open than it is at a Major League Baseball diamond. So girls that can run, using the middle of the field is a smart thing to do if they're, smaller 100-pound kids, or 110-pound kids. If they're big and strong, then we put them in the same category we were just talking about, where is our miss? Our miss is going to be the bottom half of the ball.
Well, we've got great topics coming up here in 2023. I love kind of teasing these topics because we've got really good ones we're going to be discussing, and I think that everybody should be tuning in and listening on a weekly basis. Mondays, new episodes, 9 a.m., both Apple, Google, Spotify, and then on the YouTube page of the Lab, Epstein Hitting Podcast, YouTube, to see 2 handsome guys talking about hitting in baseball.
We should change the name of the podcast to 2 Handsome Guys.
We should. It's not like it hasn't been done before. We'll be talking about technique, the fear of failure. We'll be doing mechanical breakdowns of Dylan Cruz. That'll be a lot of fun. Austin Riley, Ken Griffey Jr. I can't wait to do him. My God, he's like a crossover from my generation to the generation before me.
Yeah,
that swing. Oh,
that was
like a swing of. It's like the swing that was touched by God. I'm not afraid to say that he had one of the prettiest swings, if not the prettiest swing of all time.
Yeah, somebody said it during the draft and it blew my mind, but he is the only 1-1 guy, first round, first pick, to ever make it to the Hall of Fame.
Is that right?
Yeah. Wow. That blew my mind, right? I mean, you think about the amount of guys that are drafted the first day, right? Or even in the top 5 rounds. The percentage of those guys being, everyday major leaguers, I thought they put a graphic up. It was like 5%. 5% will play longer than, I think it was 5 years in the big leagues. And X amount of percent, won't make it there, longer than 1 year. It's just incredible. There's such a big hoopla of the draft, and there's so much money that's thrown out to first rounders. And, what is a draft pool? What is it, roughly 16 to 18 million, something like that? Maybe a total draft pool, for an organization, depending on their picks. So you're spending that amount of money every year in hopes that like one of those guys will be an everyday player for you for the next, 7 or 8 years. And sometimes that doesn't even happen.
All right. So some number 1 picks. This is throughout history. I looked it up while you were talking there.
Yeah.
Throughout Major League Baseball. This is according to MLB.com. Rick Monday of the A's out of Arizona State.
Is that like 60?
65.
65.
Your dad wasn't drafted, right? Or was he?
No, he was 64. So it was the year you were just kind of like, it was a free-for-all. Like whoever wanted to give you the most money, you went with.
That had to be the golden age of scouting, by the way.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because there was no structure. There was it was like you mentioned, it was a free for all.
Yeah, Tommy Lasorda was
go out and get him.
trying to get my dad to the Dodgers, and all that time my dad should have gone to the Dodgers, but they were more of a speedy kind of fast team. He was a power guy, and the Orioles were the best team in the league at that time, winning World Series, and he's like, I want to go there, and then he blew through the minor leagues. He was player of the year in the first year in the California League. He won the Triple Crown in AAA the next year. And then he gets to the big league camp, and Boog Powell's playing first base. And, you're not going to move Boog from first base. They tried to make my dad an outfielder, and he couldn't see well enough. He's got really bad eyes, and the lighting and everything wasn't great back then. I don't know if it would even matter. His eyes are pretty bad. And so then they sent him back down to try to become an outfielder. And he's like, I just tore up AAA. What are we doing here? And kind of forced to trade, and anyway, it's history.
Steven Shilcott of the Mets in '66. I won't go through everybody here, but Ron Blomberg of the Yankees, first baseman. These guys all had really good career WARs. Blomberg 9.4. Rick Monday had a 33.1 wins above replacement statistic. I'm surprised he's not in the Hall of Fame. Maybe he is, and people can correct me later on.
I don't look
now because I'm looking at these people, but. Dave Roberts was number 1 overall. People probably don't know him. Although he might be a Hall of Fame manager, so he may be in the Hall of Fame one day. Just looking at some of these names: Harold Baines, Bob Horner. Unfortunately, Darryl Strawberry. You thought that he was going to be a Hall of Famer, and I got into some trouble there. Excuse me. I'm saving myself from sneezing there. People watching on the YouTube side, they saw me, trying to hold back a sneeze there. B.J. Surhoff of the Brewers.
Yeah.
Shortstop. Had a nice career, but nothing to. And then Ken Griffey, of course, in 1987. Ken Griffey. Long time before I was born. Chipper Jones. Now, Chipper's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He has to be.
Oh, is he in the Hall of Fame? I don't not voted yet.
I don't think he's in yet.
I feel like he is.
You want me to look it up?
Was he a first rounder or a 1-1?
He was a 1-1.
Oh, he was.
He was a 1-1. Phil Nevin. A-Rod, too. A-Rod 93. He'll be in the Hall of Fame one day. He has to be, right? Or are they going to...
No, he's a little tainted, so...
Yeah. Josh Hamilton could have been a Hall of Famer. Wish he was. He was one of my favorite players, by the way, of all time, Josh Hamilton. That pretty swing. Joe Mauer in 2001. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, I would think. This is a list of a lot of big leaguers who made a lot of money.
Oh yeah, best player in the world. Essentially.
Some of them are not. Some of them ultimately are not going to be Hall of Famers. Although some of the names I mentioned, I think eligibility wise, aren't there yet, and they will eventually be in the Hall of Fame. But nonetheless, also too, I want to bring up before we talk a little bit about scouting amateur hitters, and I'm going to refer back to a previous episode here of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast, Jim's 4 Pillars of Hitting, and discuss that with you a little bit in context with today's show. What do you think about Sean Casey, new Yankees hitting coach? Let me frame it to you this way. If you were the Yankees hitting coach, if you were hired by Brian Cashman to be the Yankees hitting coach for the second half, what would be your approach? I'm putting you on the spot here, but that's okay because you're a genius. What would be your approach to those hitters, to that lineup, and try to get things going offensively for the Yankees? Because again, Sean Casey is coming in. He doesn't really have much coaching experience, so to speak, but he's got the big league experience. He's got that magic word, which I like to use so often, which is the wisdom. He's a guy who was a good contact hitter, didn't strike out all that much. You would think for a big guy like an Adam Dunn type size, he'd strike out a lot more. He didn't. He made a lot of good contact and great bat-to-ball skills. So what kind of impact could he have? And if you were in his shoes, what would you do as a hitting coach to try to jumpstart this Yankees offense?
So first of all, I think it's the perfect hire. If I was in that position, it would be about building relationships and really understanding what those hitters are trying to do and what they're trying to go through more than anything else, more than any mechanical stuff, more than any approach. It's, get to know your players, figure out what each of them likes to feel when they're practicing, likes to feel in the game, what they like to work on the side. You know, you look at Juan Soto's side work, totally different than maybe Judge's side work, or Stanton's side work, totally different than Judge, and maybe Volpe's got something else. So figure out what makes them tick and what makes them feel good, right? Like what makes them feel good with the bat, with their, maybe in the box, their rhythm. Like, do we like a big rhythm? Do we like slow rhythm? Okay, I'm going to monitor whatever they tell me, right? So if they're telling me I like to do this and that, I'm like, okay, well, I'll make sure you stay there as a hitting coach. I'm not going to change it. I'm just going to make sure that, hey, your rhythm usually takes this long. Now all of a sudden it takes this long. I think you're getting a little jumpy, right? Or this is the reason you're late. So that would be the big thing, is, you know, starting in and building relationships, getting to know the guys and what they're working on, you know, building some trust so they can come to you and be like, hey, do you see anything here or there? You're definitely not going in and suggesting things. Not going in and saying, hey, you know what you should really do? Like,
but what if something really sticks out, though, like with a Volpe, right? I mean, there was some couple of things mechanically and a couple of things in his stance that really stuck out. Would you go to him rather than say, I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing. You wouldn't go to a Rizzo who's had so much success and say, hey, you got to do this. But with a Volpe or an Oswaldo Cabrera or even a Josh Donaldson, who I understand, obviously he's had a great career. He's a veteran, but he's really struggling. The average isn't there. Power's there, but the average isn't there. You would go to these guys and maybe suggest certain things to certain guys, certain hitters, and maybe not others, right?
Yeah, again, it starts with the conversation of what makes them tick. And then where does that conversation lead? Does that conversation lead at, you know, if, say, it was Volpe, whatever, a couple of weeks ago, or all of a sudden, if you're struggling, then you're going to ask for help. Well, what do you see, Ep? Right? Or what do you see, you know, Sean, Mayor, whatever they call him? I don't know, Case. You know, what do you see with me? Oh, well, if you're asking, you know, I kind of feel like, you know, your lead shoulder's moving a little bit too quick because your front foot's moving left a little bit too much. You know, I never really thought of that. Well, we can look at some video and, you know, kind of check it out. So again, it starts with a conversation. You don't roll in with a list and say, okay, this guy needs to work on this. This guy needs to work on this. This guy needs to work on this. And you have meetings with everyone. It's you know, hey, you're a professional player. You've been very successful. Let's see if we can change the culture, because more than anything, it probably was a bad culture with not that Lawson created a bad culture, but the guys are getting frustrated, right? The hitting coaches, and that's such a hard job. Like, the hitting coach job is like, all they do is take the fall. They never get credit for anything, right? If guys are hitting good and the players are doing great, it's not because the hitting coach created great plans or great approaches or great, you know, mechanical adjustments to players. And then when they go bad, why is the hitting coach not fixing everyone? So, you know, he was in a very, very stressful environment with his staff, I'm sure. And, you know, players feed off the energy of their leaders, you know, and usually that's a manager's job, right? Like, why all of a sudden are the Rangers, you know, better this year, right? Well, they have a couple better players than last year, not a ton, right? Especially
your guy, your dad's guy, Bruce Boch.
Yeah, like Boch is a professional, and he creates a calmness in the dugout, right? But he sticks up for his guys, but he doesn't panic. And his meetings are different than meetings of other guys that might be younger. And so it creates an environment that, hey, you know, we lose 2 or 3 games. It's okay. Like, we're better than this. Let's make a few adjustments and we'll be okay. Not, okay, we're going down the wrong hole now. And then all of a sudden, you know, everybody in the front office is stressed out and the coaches are stressed out. And then eventually that feeds to the players. Now, multiply that by 10, that's what you get in New York, right? The media, the fans, everybody is on you every time you don't get a hit, right? Every time you strike out 12 times a game as a team and, you know, only get 4 hits. So Judge will make everybody better. When Judge gets back and he gets healthy and he gets in the lineup, then there's some fear in there. He's going to hit because the dude can hit. And then everyone will start to feel better. But I honestly do think that was a pretty cool, it could have been anyone, but I like Casey and his approach. And listen, just because Sean Casey was a slap hitting first baseman, let's be honest. Like, he was not a power guy. He was a good hitter. He was a good solid hitter. It doesn't matter what kind of hitter he is. He could have been a crappy hitter. He could have been he was an all-star, I believe. Like, this guy was a really good player. He could have been what's his name? Rob Deere, right? He could have been Rob Deere. And of course, Rob Deere still struck out less times than guys do today. But, you know, Rob Deere was like, oh, here it is. He's going to either hit a home run or he's going to strike out. he could have been Rob Deere. He could have been Tony Gwynn, right? That didn't hit very many home runs, but it doesn't matter. It's how do you communicate information? What do you believe in as a hitter? That's what the Yankees will find, right? He's not going to make everybody look like him. He's not going to make everybody slap the ball the other way and get thrown out at first base. Remember that? You see that highlight? Right?
Because he thought it was caught.
He thought it was
give him a break.
Yeah, nobody ever sees that, like where he stops at home plate, right? They just see that he got.
By the way, Sean Casey is a 3-time All-Star, a career .302 hitter. In his final year with Boston, 69 games. In 2008, he hit .322. He never hit below, outside of 6 at-bats with Cleveland 97, he never hit below 240. And he hit over 300, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Hit 296 in 2006, hit 324 in 2004 with Cincinnati, and hit 332 in 1999 at the age of 24 with Cincinnati. That year played in 151 games. That was a career high. Batting average is not the end-all, be-all, but it goes to show you, to my point from earlier, that he had great bat-to-ball skills.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, he did have sneaky power early in his career, where he hit 25 home runs in 99, hit 24 home runs in 2004. So this guy, he put up some really good numbers to a point where you can look back and say he had a really, not a Hall of Famer, but he had a really good, successful 12-year major league career. And I think a lot of players, and if you believe news stories that have come out, Yankees hitters are really pumped to have him as their hitting coach. I think that still goes a long way. A former player like a Sean Casey, and a lot of these guys too, these major leaguers at the highest level, they grew up watching Sean Casey. They're younger than me, my age. I grew up watching a guy like Sean Casey, and if he was my hitting coach, that would get me fired up too.
Yeah, I mean, he could, I would say batting average more than anything else, maybe aside from the last 5 years or so, is pride, right? It's pride. You want to hit 300. Like, that makes you a great hitter, because as a kid, it was like, you hit 300 in the big leagues, right? You're going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not the case, but it's pride. Guys are grinding out at bats to try to get extra hits, and then that pride is gone now. But he, he's whatever. He sacrificed with 2 strikes. He tried to hit balls the other way and put balls in play, and maybe he could have hit more home runs, but he would have hit 250. It was his choice. He definitely was strong enough to do that. So, but like I said earlier, it really doesn't matter what kind of player you were. It's a definite different. And these big leaguers, they watch MLB tonight too to see what happened. They turn it on at midnight before going to bed and see how everybody did, their buddies did, and how the other teams in their division did, right? So they're hearing Sean Casey talk, and they're seeing different things. He's out there interviewing people. He interviews guys at spring training. So he's an energetic guy. He's got a great personality. I really think he's a positive. He makes you feel good. Even if you're not in the room, he makes you feel good just the way he delivers information. Whether or not he's going to continue to do this, because I think he's very good on the MLB network. I think he's really good at what he does, and whether or not he wants to be a major league coach and travel all over the place again, I don't know. But I think he's going to be just fine at it. In fact, he might be absolutely great at it.
Well, good luck to Sean Casey. The Yankees, they have to make the postseason. They have to make the postseason every year, and one of their glaring holes, outside of all the injuries, of course, is their lack of offensive production. And, of course, missing Aaron Judge. No word on when he will be back, but good luck to Sean Casey. And again, you mentioned there, you said it perfectly, that hitting coaches, oftentimes they get no credit at all. Same thing with pitching coaches.
Yeah.
They don't get as much credit as they deserve, and then they're the first ones to take the fall. Although that trend may be changing a little bit, with now Performance 180 standing right behind Paul Skeens with his cool mustache during the MLB draft, getting interviewed on ESPN. So maybe that tide is turning, where hitting coaches will now, and pitching coaches will now, take more credit because of Performance 180. Fucking asshole. All right, moving on here, starting today's topic, episode 147, scouting amateur hitters. I'm going to pull up here my pillars of hitting that we talked about in a previous episode. Some of my pillars of hitting: timing and vision, swing plane and bat path, making adjustments, and hitters' confidence. Now, you're getting drafted or about to get drafted. Obviously, you have a ton of confidence, okay? So we can cross that one off the list when we're evaluating and scouting amateur hitters. Timing and vision. Timing, again, it's fleeting. You have to make adjustments to be able to be on time with the pitch, but the pitcher's job is to get you out based off that mixing and matching of your timing and messing up such. Your vision. Go to the eye doctor if you have vision problems. Swing plane and bat path. That's me right there. And of course, the ability to make adjustments. Those are the two, in my opinion, the two most important things when scouting amateur hitters. Can this guy, whether it's a high school hitter, whether it's a college hitter, I think college hitters are better than high school hitters at doing this, but how does that player, that hitter in game, make adjustments when the pitcher is trying to mess up his timing or trying to get him out? And what's this hitter's swing plane and bat path like? Are we really going to have to go in and fix that swing plane and bat path, which is so important? Those are the two things, in my opinion, that are so important when you're scouting amateur hitters going forward. What are your pillars, if you will, when you're scouting amateur hitters, as you just did with the Brewers in this past year's draft?
Well, you're pretty much right on, in what you're thinking. It's you have different measurables for different players, and are we looking for a shortstop athletic guy? Are we looking for somebody that provides us a little bit more power? Are we looking for defense first? Are we looking for offense first? What do these players do? What you said between college and high school, that's a different player. Okay, so now all of a sudden we're playing the long game of, we draft this. So we drafted a high school kid that I absolutely loved in what round was it? It was 5th round or 6th round. I can't think of his name right now. Ole Miss commit. Are they going to be able to turn him? He fantastic, right? One of my favorite guys on the list. Fantastic mechanics, adjustability in the swing plane is good, build is great. He's going to be like A-Rod when he fills out, probably that size. Sorry, I'm trying to think of it as I'm talking, but where do we see this player in 3 years? This player could end up going to Ole Miss, right? He's going to get great coaching. A lot of guys go to college because they're going to, they think they can raise their stock, right? Okay, I was an X-rounder, but they're giving me 3rd round money or 2nd round money. But I think I can be an All-American in the SEC and end up being, being a top 5 pick overall. But what I see is they're going to go and develop. Sometimes you go to an SEC school, and that's why it's hard to draft high school guys going to SEC school. Hey, listen, not everybody plays in the SEC, by the way, right? They're going to bring in 2 or 3 shortstops. One of them's going to play. So there's risk of going to Arkansas. There's a risk going to LSU, who's getting transferred. All these schools are getting transfers in too. There's a risk going to Florida. You better really be a dude and believe in yourself to turn down $1 million or $500,000. So, but you take a college guy, I'm going to rank college guys a little bit different because their life was a little bit easier, right? If they went into the SEC, they got nutritionalists, they're eating well, they're traveling well, people are taking care of them, they have good equipment, they practice every single day in a wonderful environment, with great coaching staffs, great technology, so on and so forth. So that player goes and plays 3 years in the SEC or, even the Big 10, Big 12, whatever. They're going to get drastically better and drastically more experience of how to make adjustments, right? Do we have an adjustability part of our swing? Yeah, the 18-year-old probably has the adjustability, doesn't know how to use it. Does the 21-year-old have it? Yeah, that 21-year-old probably has the experience of facing, having whatever, 700 more, at-bats between games and inter-squads and fall ball. They have that experience of making adjustments and what is this pitcher trying to do to me, so on and so forth. So obviously when you're drafting a college guy, you want the mechanics to be pretty locked in. If you have to make changes when guys are in their 20s, it's going to be a little bit tougher. But is it a catastrophic swing change or is it something small like just a swing plane issue of how they come into the ball or how they leave the swing plane? Is it something easy like that? is it rhythm based? So rhythm is really important for me. If a guy has good rhythm and they're 18, boom, I'm all in. If a guy has good rhythm at 13 or 14, like the international players I see, I'm all in. Okay, what you see at 13 and 14-year-olds is you see incredible athleticism. You see players that are 135 pounds, and usually they have really good rhythm in BP, and in games it's all over the place, right? So the cool part about what I do is I get to see what the best players in the world are at 13, and then I get to see what they're like at like 17, 16, 17, and then 18 when they go to the amateur draft and where they go to college. So you have this big spectrum of, how do players progress throughout, maybe that 8-year span. And then I can use that in my scouting, and that's experience, right? I can use that as, okay, I see this player kind of ending up here in a few years, or that's not fixable. Like, we don't want to mess with that because we don't have the right player development people to help with catastrophic issues. By the way, no one does. We have player development guys that can kind of help with, X, Y, and Z. And I think if we draft this player, those player development guys in Arizona or at A-ball or, wherever, they're going to be able to get the most out of that.
So we're talking about scouting amateur hitters today, and we just highlighted and glossed over scouting amateur hitters that are eligible for the draft. What about international hitters? You've talked about in previous episodes about where international hitters, the young guys, 15, 16-year-olds, it's a lot more upper body centric than it is lower body centric. In other words, they use their upper body first before their lower half, where it's the opposite way around with most American-born or MLB draft eligible type players. So when you're scouting amateur hitters internationally, what are some of the things that you're looking for?
I'm looking for how they control their bodies, right? So if they can control their stride and their body and they're not... So when we're young and our body is very flexible and we don't quite have the coordination over every single part of our body just because we're wiry. Like, you put a K-vest on a 14-year-old that's 130 pounds and the readings don't do you any good. Like, they're going to rotate faster than a major leaguer, but they have no control over their rotation, right? They're not transferring energy because they just spin through and their elbows are all over the place. So if I can see a 13, 14, 15-year-old, they can sign, shortly thereafter. But, we start looking at them when they're really young. If I see control over it at that age, control over their elbows initially, they're in sequence, that's like, okay, let's keep an eye on this. Like, this is going to move the right way. It's only going to get better as they get stronger. If there are players that are kind of out of control, I'm probably not going to mess around with that. But you definitely have to revisit when they're 15 because all of a sudden maybe they got better. So with young kids, yeah, it's totally different. America, and why? Because they have Twitter in the Dominican, right? But everything here is how can we load up into our backside and release the tension in the hip and the snap the hands through and turn the barrel and all that kind of stuff, which is more of a spinny kind of body move. That's always done on a tee, by the way. Like, it's never done off a machine throwing a ball that's dropping 5 degrees. Like, please let me see that. That's the focus here in the U.S. because of, I guess, social media or the internet or YouTube or whatever we're talking about. Where there it's, let's hit this ball back through the middle. Like, let's hit this ball off the tee, and all I want you to do is hit it off the sweet spot of the bat, and I want it to hit the back of the cage. And what that promotes is proper upper body moves. Then their legs may be cruddy, but hey, we're making contact, right? We're playing, we're finding barrels. Then as they get bigger and stronger, you start to see the leg kick come in. So all of a sudden they get a bigger weight shift. So you had a bigger weight shift to really good upper body, and now all of a sudden the body's starting to work kind of in unison. That's the way I work. Right or wrong, that's the way I work. Like, I want players to find barrels first. I want to make sure their upper body is working. And then we will start to build in more energy. I think what people don't really see, and please listen to this, actually, those people that are out there, because I train a lot of players from 10 years old all the way up to, mid-20s. And if you add a little bit of extra load in the lower body, or you load the back hip more to a player that's pretty decent, I see very minimal changes in exit velocity. So exit velocity is where it's at. Like, what is the ball doing after contact? I don't care what your bat speed is. Like, your bat speed could be great. If you don't hit a barrel, then your bat speed is going to be higher than the exit velocity because you hit it off the end of the bat because you spin across it.
By the way, can I ask, is that why bat quickness maybe is more important than bat speed? Because bat speed, from what you explained right there, could actually be a little bit deceiving.
Bat quickness can be deceiving too if you don't find a barrel. So everything's about bat quickness. I can have bat quickness. All I have to do is let the ball travel to my back hip instead of hitting it in my front hip. I'm quicker to the ball, but I'm not going to have any leverage hitting the ball that deep in the zone, right? So bat quickness comes with decent mechanics and being athletic. Like, I haven't had, I mean, maybe a 10-year-old doesn't have bat quickness. Like, if you cast, you're gonna be slow to the ball. If you leave your arms behind and over rotate your chest will get to where it should be, but your bat will be, way back still towards the catcher. Like, you're not going to have bat quickness. But if you have decent mechanics and your body's in sequence, like, you're gonna be quick enough to the ball. So all these little things that people talk about, all these little things, load this, throw this, snap this, they lead to very, very minimal exit velocity gains. Like, okay, maybe 1 mile an hour or 2. That's not the difference between hitting a ball 300 feet and 400 feet. So if you have somebody that's 170 pounds and they have an exit velocity of 82 miles an hour, and you get them to load their back hip and you get them to, do all this kind of crazy stuff, and it works, right? And they still find a barrel doing it because they, can find a barrel. That's good. They might go up 1 or 2 miles an hour. So it's like we're selling out on all these risks. And those are risky ass moves. If you do that move, you're probably going to swing and miss a ton. You really are. Unless you have a good upper body to go with it, which, is very helpful. So it's not like you're going to take, so I get people all the time, look, I got to hit the ball harder, right? You're 165 pounds and you hit the ball 80 miles an hour and you're in high school. Okay, you got to hit the ball. What do those guys on TV do? They hit the ball 100 miles an hour. How do I get to 100? I don't know. Get different parents with a different genetic code, ball 60 pounds, and do the same thing you're doing now because your mechanics are really good. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. Not everybody's a professional prospect. Not everybody's a Division I prospect. Like, you have to get out of your body what your body has, and every body has limitations. Look, I could hit a ball really far. For some reason, I couldn't run a damn lick, right? Like, those are two pretty athletic moves. I can swing a bat or an axe or whatever, some kind of object. If I was a caveman, I would have been the guy that goes out and has to, knock a bear to the ground, with a club. But if that bear was running after me, I'm a dead man, right? So, so everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and that's scouting too. Like, what are their strengths and weaknesses? How do we get the most out of those strengths, and how do we minimize the weaknesses?
So before we wrap up today's episode, you mentioned earlier in the show, by the way, email us too, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. We may have had a listener question this week, and I bookmarked it on my computer to go back and pull it for today's episode, but I forgot when I was prepping, so next episode. Sorry about that. My bad. Email us, though.
Best in the business for nothing, folks.
Email us, Jimbo Podcast. I do see all the emails, so email us, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. You mentioned earlier in the episode figuring out your miss. How do you figure out when you're scouting an amateur hitter that the Brewers may want to draft or may want to sign internationally? How do you figure out a player's miss? How do you figure out that amateur hitter's type miss that better gives you an insight as to what hitter they could become in the future?
Yeah, I can pretty much watch BP and just watch the flight of the ball and figure out what their miss is going to be. So once I see somebody live, it's pretty obvious to me. I don't really need to see video for that. I can just kind of watch the ball come off their bat during BP. And then obviously I need to compare that to games, because sometimes game swings do alter a little bit. Guys get amped up or girls get amped up, during the game, and find that miss. And then, from there, usually those misses need to be changed. Like, okay, that's a bigger miss. let's, if we're just flying out to right field, if we're right-handed hitters and we're slicing balls down the line or something, that's usually a catastrophic. That's a barrel drop, an early barrel turn and drop, and not staying on plane. If they have, like I said, a little bit of that barrel drop, but then they stay through the ball sometimes instead of coming across it, they'll stay through it. Then they'll be able to drive that ball more to, I'm talking about right-handed hitters, more towards right center with height and more backspin and less side spin. So, yeah, I mean, I could see it mechanically in slow motion, but it's very easy to see. I could just go behind the shell during batting practice and kind of see what their miss is and then create a plan from there.
All right, coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about counteracting a pitcher's strategies. We're also, I forgot to mention this, we're going to be talking and breaking down the swing of Luis O'Rise. Can't wait to do that one. There's a guy who knows who he is. He doesn't try to go outside of what he isn't and try to be something that he is not. And through all that word salad that I just said, what I'm trying to say is that he knows who he is as a hitter. Hitters, know thyself. That was a previous episode in the podcast archive, so go back and listen, Apple, Google, Spotify, or watch on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. Well, we will be breaking down the swing, another mechanical breakdown of Luis O'Rise coming up later in the year. Do you have anything before we go?
Nothing. I did set the coaches training event in Texas in College Station, October 14th and 15th this year. So that's posted on the website if you're interested in coming out. Send us a note, go to epsteinhitting.com. And if you have a group, if you have like 3 or 4 or 5 guys, then, we give discounts to people from the same organization and travel teams, and so on and so forth.
All right. Very good. We will talk to you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe, and we will talk to you very soon. Have a great week.